Welcome into another Giants Bleacher Report stream. I am your host, Authentic. We got a lot to talk about today. A little bit from this past game against the Dallas Cowboys. Good chunk to preview against the Seattle Seahawks this week. The Giants are definitely in a very desperate place right now when it comes to our place in the NFC East division, especially with those Commanders surprisingly sitting at the top of the division at 3-1 right now. And you can already see that the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles are clawing to get back in the race here and try to get atop the division once again. The Giants are now 7-14 in their last 21 games. And I think that speaks volumes about Brian Daboll. I think that speaks volumes about how this offense has been operated from the quarterback standpoint. Also with our new shiny weapon, we're going to talk about that today, about how that is affecting this offense, the way that we have been, I won't say over-targeting, but definitely utilizing Malik Nabers to his best ability right now. As far as the short passing attack goes, it's now 7 straight losses to the Dallas Cowboys, and we've lost 14 of the last 15 against the Cowboys. I've pretty much given up as far as it goes, in matchups against the Dallas Cowboys. And the Giants are now coming off a 9 days rest, getting ready to take on the Seattle Seahawks here. This game's going to be Sunday at 4 p.m. The Seahawks are coming off just 6 days rest. They were one of the Monday night games and lost a tough one to the Detroit Lions. Giants coming off a pretty close loss to the Dallas Cowboys, 20-15. Right now, Vegas has the Seahawks favored by 6 points. I think that's pretty fair coming into this one. The Seahawks are 3-1. I think they have been a better team. That was their first loss this past week. The over-under in this one is 42 points. And last week, the Seahawks offense definitely was not the problem against the Detroit Lions. 38 first downs by Geno. It's the most ever in NFL history by a losing team. He was 38 of 56. 395 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Their offense had 516 total yards of offense. They ran 78 plays, and they were 75% efficiency rate in the red zone. They scored over 30 points. Kenneth Walker was averaging 6.7 yards per carry. He had 12 for 80 yards. I think you could have gotten the ball a little bit more if the Seattle Seahawks didn't fall behind on the scoreboard, and they still lost the game. And going up against the Detroit Lions, a team that was in the NFC Championship last year, is going to be a lot different than going up against our New York Giants. And I think a good way to maybe try to stay in this game would be a similar attack to what we saw against the Dallas Cowboys, where Brian Daboll tried to be efficient with the running game. And although it wasn't clicking, he's still committed to the run on the day. And I do want to pull up Devin Singletary's statistics here. I think I do have those, which were, just extremely poor. We were going up against the worst rushing defense in the Dallas Cowboys last week entering that game. We had 29 rushing yards as a team at the end of the first half, and somehow we ended up with less rushing yards when the game was over. After getting 8 more attempts, we lost 3 yards and finished the day with 24 total carries for 26 yards, and Devin Singletary just was not good. 14 carries for 24 yards. I did look at the PFF grades. Kind of said our offensive line was opening up a few holes. I do think that this is a schematic type of thing going on with Brian Daboll as well. And they tried to get away from the middle of the Dallas Cowboys defense. But Mozzie Smith definitely had a good game, which is very surprising considering how he's been off to an extremely slow start since the Dallas Cowboys drafted him to be the guy in the middle of that defense. The longest run of the day for the Giants was 5 yards. And Devin Singletary's coming into this game with just 221 yards on the year, 2 touchdowns. He averaged 1.7 yards per carry in this one. And that's just not going to get it done. And we know we need better play out of the quarterback, but I've said for a long time that there are 2 types of quarterbacks in the NFL. There are those that need a running game, and there are those that don't. And they're few and far between the guys that don't need a running game. Guys like Lamar Jackson, guys like Patrick Mahomes, who they still utilize a rushing attack over there in Kansas City. Guys like Josh Allen have shown they can do it. And there's not really many other quarterbacks that can really be efficient like that without a rushing attack. And I think the Giants, with our quarterback and the situation we are in right now, I think it's pretty obvious that we have to run the ball to be effective and be able to open up these deep shots that we can convert on a higher clip at coming off the play action. Daniel Jones obviously was very inaccurate when it came to the deep shots last game. We're going to go over some of those numbers as well today. But the Giants also got to be better in the red zone. And this year they have been better on the road in the red zone. But throughout the year, both home and away, they're converting at a 50% clip right now in the red zone. Last game, 0%. We were 0 of 2 in the red zone. At home, we're 44% converting. And on the road, we're converting on 85.7% of our attempts in the red zone. And, I kind of was just fooling around on my social media the other day. and posted up a tweet about Daniel Jones and the lack of touchdowns that our home audience has seen from him through the air. And although it has been just 4 games, it's been 634 days since Daniel Jones has thrown a touchdown in front of the home crowd. And obviously, we're on the road this week, so that streak will extend a good bit. But I think it just speaks volumes to not only the inefficiency at home through the air, but also Daniel Jones' inability to stay healthy. And now that we're coming up on, a quarter, or we just finished a quarter of the season, I think a lot of people are starting to rethink about that injury clause that Daniel Jones has in his contract. And everybody knows that availability is the best ability. And right now, Daniel Jones through the year has been available, and his offensive line has played better. But throughout his career, that's definitely been a problem. And I think that just speaks to the lack of productivity at home in front of the home stadium. And I just can't imagine being there as a season ticket holder and not seeing your quarterback put up a touchdown at home in over 2 seasons. It's just it's absolutely pathetic if you ask me. And I understand that it's not that many games, but nonetheless, we got to find a way to fix that. And I think it starts with the run. Now, Seattle was in a bit of a boat race game last week against the Detroit Lions where they put up 29 points. This game was a 1-score lead in the fourth quarter. They decided to go for 2 points when they were down by what would have been 7 if they just kicked the extra point. They didn't get the 2-point conversion. I think the call on the field was kind of wrong, but they were trying to keep up with the Detroit Lions, and their defense was absolutely decimated with injuries in this one as well. And Detroit was 5 of 5 in the red zone. I think it's going to take a similar effort from the New York Giants, maybe not quite getting down there 5 times, but at least maximizing on your attempts and being efficient when you get in the red zone. And as Giants fans, I don't like to wish injury upon anybody, but with the guys that the Seattle Seahawks had out on their defense last week, it made it extremely tough for them to try to stop that high-potent, high-power Detroit Lions offense. And they were missing plenty of players up front for the Seattle Seahawks. Outside linebacker Boye Mafe was out. Former New York Giant defensive tackle, kind of playing some defensive end over there as well. Leonard Williams was out. D-tackle Byron Murphy was out. And outside linebacker Uchenna Nwosu, he was also out. And if you take a look at his contract, you'll know that that's definitely a detriment to the Seattle Seahawks. He just got the bag, and he is absolutely a dog on that defense. All of those guys are questionable coming into this week going up against the New York Giants, along with former safety Julian Love and inside linebacker Jerome Baker, who I remember he had a real gruesome injury a couple of years back. I think that was 2 years ago on the goal line, chasing down a play. But the Giants are also dealing with their fair share of injuries coming out of this last game as well. Malik Neighbors being one of the obvious ones in the concussion protocol right now. Devin Singletary, who Brian Daboll did say that it doesn't seem like it's going to be a lingering injury, is dealing with the groin injury right now. Andrew Phillips still dealing with that calf. He missed last week's game as well. And Adoree Jackson, the guy that we signed, brought in on a contract that has no guarantees, which is kind of interesting now that he has not been playing much, is dealing with a calf injury as well. And Brian Burns was limited in practice today, along with Wan'Dale Robinson, who's dealing with a heel injury. And it's time that not only the New York Giants get healthy, but the guys that have been playing well, guys like Wan'Dale Robinson, who has been seeing a ton of targets, guys like Malik Neighbors, who has been the focal point of the New York Giants offense, it'll be detrimental if that guy cannot go and play in this game on Sunday at 4 p.m. against the Seattle Seahawks. Malik Neighbors against Dallas, he did it in a bunch of short chunks, 15 targets, 12 receptions, 115 yards on the day. That's 9.6 yards per reception, which to me, that number needs to go up a lot more to maximize the type of wide receiver that Malik Neighbors is. Very explosive, very dynamic. He can run all those routes down the field. It's kind of unfortunate to see the Washington Commanders within our division with Jaden Daniels at the quarterback position excelling down the field and doing exactly what the two of them did at LSU just a season ago. But Malik Neighbors did have the 39-yard reception on the left sideline where he ran a double move that was literally blessed by the football gods. It's one of the best double moves I've seen to date. And Daniel Jones kind of read it a little bit late. On a double move, I mean, the perfect way to run the double move is the one you saw on Monday night from Jaden Daniels to Terry McLaurin, which pretty much put that game out of reach. It sealed that game for them. And in this one with Daniel Jones and Malik Neighbors, the ball's a little late. The ball's got this high trajectory on it, hangs in the air for extremely long, allows the Dallas Cowboys safety to come up and make a play. Whereas if you put that ball on a bit of a rope to Malik Neighbors, we're talking about an easy walk-in touchdown. Now, let's remove that 39-yard reception and just look at the numbers without the one explosive play that we had on the day through the passing attack. If you take away that 39-yard reception, Malik Nabers was averaging 6.9 yards per reception. And for me, those are tight end like yards per reception type of numbers. Now, we have been targeting Malik Nabers a ton. He's first in the NFL in targets, first in receptions. He's first in explosive plays of 20 yards or more. He's got 7 of those on the season. He's third in receiving touchdowns, second in yards with 386. He's second in yards per game with 96.5 yards per game. And he's 11th in YAC right now. And we're going up against another guy who's been quietly rising the ranks, I'll say, especially this season, in DK Metcalf. And I think that this is going to be a bit of an interesting matchup if Malik Nabers is able to go in this one, because DK Metcalf has been playing some really good ball. And the reason why the Seattle Seahawks got off to a 3-0 start before taking that L to the Detroit Lions has a lot to do with DK Metcalf. 3 consecutive games now of 100 yards, back-to-back games with 104 yards against Detroit and Miami. He had 4 receptions for 104 against Miami, 7 for 104 against Detroit. And he had 10 receptions for 129 yards versus the New England Patriots. He had a touchdown in the first 2 games. DK Metcalf right now has 366 yards on the season. He's just a tick behind Malik Nabers, sitting in 3rd place right now. And the thing is he's doing it the way that a traditional wide receiver that is explosive, dynamic, has the strength, and has the quarterback to be able to have the ability to do this is doing things. 24 receptions on 36 targets. And you compare that, it's almost 20 less targets than what Malik Nabers has, and he's only 20 yards behind Malik Nabers on the year. His longest reception of the year is 71 yards, where Malik Nabers' longest reception was the one against the Dallas Cowboys for 39 yards. And Malik Nabers is definitely that weapon for the New York Giants. And I think a lot of people thought that Malik Nabers was going to be able to save Daniel Jones and be able to salvage the quarterback that we have in Daniel Jones and be able to put Daniel Jones' numbers over the top. We know that Daniel Jones is a guy that struggles to get to 4,000 yards just about every year. Can't get into that 25 to 30 passing touchdowns ballpark, just has not been his way of operating. And a lot of people were banking on a guy like Malik Nabers to come in and be able to help that situation. And I think obviously you can see it with your eyes that Malik Nabers is helping the situation. But I do think with the quarterback that we have on this roster, it's not only holding back Malik Nabers, I feel like it's holding back Brian Daboll. And big shout out to NYCE one time in the building. I see you, fam. Hope all is well on this Wednesday afternoon. And he says, do we try to pick up Russell Wilson? I think our avenue and our lane to be able to do that might have already passed. We did bring in Russell Wilson for a visit. It's no telling what kind of football he would be playing right now. And I think Justin Fields has kind of took over that starting job. But this has been the same Daniel Jones, and we definitely have to address the quarterback position. Today's topic about going into this game is absolutely going to be about the future at the quarterback position and how I think that Brian Daboll, Joe Schoen, John Mara, and everybody else in that front office need to be forward thinking right now and thinking about the future of the quarterback position for the New York Giants. Now, I wanted to bring up some numbers to y'all that explain that Daniel Jones is pretty much the same quarterback that he's been for the last 3 seasons. The only difference is the volume right now. So let's quickly go through 2022, and we're going to go all the way to 2024, and we're going to do this in a 4-game sample. So the first 4 games of the year. In 2022, Daniel Jones, 67 of 105 for 631 yards, right? Completion percentage of 63.8. His yards per attempt was 6.2. Ended the year at 6.95. 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He was sacked 13 times. He had 1 fumble lost. So that's 2022. In 2023, through 4 games, 90 of 131 for 765 yards. This is arguably one of Daniel Jones' worst seasons as well. Completion percentage was 68.7. Yards per attempt, 5.6, which is very close to that 6.2 a year prior. His yards per attempt at the end of the year was almost identical at 5.68. 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions in comparison to the 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions a year prior. Sacked 15 times, 1 fumble lost. The theme is pretty similar here. Now let's go to this season. Through 4 games, Daniel Jones is 91 of 44, which is now 13 more attempts than he had at this point in time through 4 games, more than he has ever had in the last 3 seasons. Completion percentage of 63.1, yards per attempt of 6.1, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, sacked 9 times, has 1 fumble. It was recovered by our team. We're looking at the same exact quarterback that we've seen for the last 3 years. Give or take 1 turnover, give or take 1 or 2 touchdowns. And I think that with the offensive line being bolstered up, that Joe Schoen did do a good job of, I think that puts Daniel Jones in a position to play better football, but still he is the same quarterback. Struggling to connect on these deep shots. We talked about this on the last stream, that a drive is 10 times more likely to end in a touchdown if you have just one explosive play of 20 yards or more on the drive. Now, last night or on Monday night against the Seattle Seahawks, the Detroit Lions put up a perfect game offensively. Jared Goff was 18 of 18 for 292 yards. It was a record. 3 total touchdowns. He even caught a touchdown as well. He had 0 throws that were air yards of 20 yards or more, but he had 2 big-time throws. And I think that Daniel Jones can take a page out of Jared Goff's book here and see that if he can't connect on the deep shots, at least try to catch the wide receivers in stride. That has been an ongoing issue for him, especially when it comes to Wan'Dale Robinson. And obviously with Malik Neighbors, who is just a straight-up beast and a straight-up monster and is able to take inaccurate throws and still find ways to get the necessary yak and get the first downs. But I do think that they're placing a little bit too much responsibility on Malik Neighbors' shoulders. And this would be really nice that if Malik Neighbors on certain plays could be that decoy, and maybe you bring in a guy like Jalen Hyatt or Darius Slayton to run these deep go routes and seize one-on-one coverage, and we can possibly find a way to connect. And Daniel Jones had a few opportunities in that game against Dallas. Obviously, the one where we had the offsides penalty and we got a free play. Daniel Jones just puts the ball about 4 to 5 yards short. And I don't put that drop on Darius Slayton working his way back to an inaccurate pass. There have been some mixed reviews on that. Now, the 2 big-time throws, one of them was the 70-yard throw and touchdown to Jameson Williams, where he caught the ball at about 12 yards depth of target. And the way that he caught the ball in stride, it allowed him to be able to just catch it and go up that sideline. No one was even near him within 20 yards of the end zone. No one was even near him. And they're celebrating a 70-yard touchdown a few seconds later. Thus far, Daniel Jones in this game versus Dallas, he was 1 of 6 on passes of 20 yards or more. He was 2 of 8 on passes that are 15 yards or more. Talked about the free play to Slayton. He had the post route to Malik Neighbors as well, where the ball came up extremely short. Malik Neighbors having to work his way back towards the ball. Now, if Daniel Jones had the deep ball and he was connected on at least, let's say, just half of these, I think on the season, Daniel Jones right now is 2 of 15 on passes that are 15 yards or more. And let's just say he could be at 40 or 50% on some of these deep shots, especially in this Dallas Cowboys game. Let's just say he connected on 2 of those. You would be looking at a quarterback that is extremely efficient on all levels of the field, because when it comes to the intermediate stuff of 15 yards or less, in that Cowboys game, Daniel Jones was 27 of 32. Those are great numbers. And when I looked at the next-gen stats and I looked at the passing chart, I was just extremely surprised to just see dot after dot after dot after dot after dot of completion. But at the same time, I think this is Brian Daboll being hampered and hamstringed by the quarterback and just running a lot of short concepts that will allow his receivers to get just enough open, just enough separation to be able to make some of these plays. Now, the Giants are also tied for the most drops in the NFL right now. And that's not a good thing either. They're tied with the Cleveland Browns. They have 11 drops on the year. And you got to clean those things up. And I do think that when passes are just a bit inaccurate, that doesn't help the wide receivers. But nonetheless, if the ball is on target and you're dropping it and it's within your catch radius, that's going to be a drop on you. Daniel Jones has seen the 4th most pressures of any quarterback in the NFL right now. And I think a lot of that has to do with him dropping back more than most of the quarterbacks in the league, because Daniel Jones has the 5th most dropbacks of any quarterback right now in the league through 4 weeks. He's playing pretty clean football, has not turned the ball over much since the Minnesota Vikings game. Just 4 turnover-worthy plays all year. But I think this is another thing that is hampering Brian Daboll. Low risk, low reward type of offense. And it's absolutely not benefiting our other wide receivers. Big shout out to Gene Clemens, who really brought this to my attention about the ADOT and the yards per reception for a lot of our receivers, that prompted me to just go digging deep into seeing what is going on with this offense. Now, Wan'Dale Robinson is a guy that has been being targeted a ton this year. He had 14 targets versus the Dallas Cowboys, 11 receptions for just 71 yards, 6.5 yards per reception. The average depth of target on Wan'Dale Robinson's targets was 5.1 yards. And Wan'Dale is a guy that is capable of getting the necessary yak. Last year, half of his yards were yards after the catch. This year, or this game in particular, you're looking at the ADOT being 5.1 yards, but the yards per reception only being 6.5. So that just says to me that we're not allowing our receivers to catch a ball in stride and catch it and go. He had 12 targets in week 1 versus the Minnesota Vikings. And Wan'Dale Robinson has more targets than so many of the top tier wide receiver ones in this league. Guys like Amari Cooper, DJ Moore, Garrett Wilson, Stephon Diggs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb even, Justin Jefferson, Mike Evans, Terry McLaurin, George Pickens. Wan'Dale has more targets than all of these guys. And the yards don't show for it. Now let's talk about Jalen Hyatt just a little bit here. Just 13 snaps versus Dallas for Jalen Hyatt. The only target that he got in that game was on a Hail Mary. Jalen Hyatt has 0 receptions on the year. And last year, we had the exact same beef for what was going on with this offense, talking about Brian Daboll and talking about not only Jalen Hyatt not getting the snaps, but Jalen Hyatt having multiple games throughout the year where he has 0 targets. He's got 0 receptions on a year. I think he has just 4 targets. I could be wrong, and it could be just 3 targets. And he's not playing a lot of snaps. This is week in and week out that Jalen Hyatt's snaps are under 15. You spent 4th-round draft capital on Theo Johnson. After spending 4th-round draft capital on Daniel Bellinger and trading a 3rd-round pick for Darren Waller last year when you knew that he was headed into retirement, Theo Johnson played 71% of the snaps versus Dallas. He had 1 target, 1 reception for 6 yards. He was out there for 49 snaps, and he got 1 target. He's got 8 targets on the year with just 3 receptions. And Darius Slayton, the guy who I think a lot of people thought was going to be a wide receiver 4, even a wide receiver 5 this year, which is ridiculous. I thought that until Jalen Hyatt could prove he was a better wide receiver than Darius Slayton had that wide receiver 2, especially on the outsides, locked up with Malik Neighbors coming in. Darius Slayton has been our wide receiver 1 for pretty much every year that he's been here. He had 58 snaps versus Dallas. 84% of the snaps he was on the field. He had just 5 targets for 3 receptions. But the yards per reception for Darius Slayton at 18.7 is very different than what we're seeing with the rest of this wide receiving core. Maybe that plays to the chemistry that he has with Daniel Jones, which in this game against Dallas was spotty for sure. You can look back at that inside comeback route that he ran late in the game, and the ball was kind of on the outside shoulder, kind of low to the ground. And Darius Slayton tried to dive for it, couldn't make the catch on that one. But right now, he's played 217 snaps total, and he's got 15 targets on the year. That's 1 target every 14 and a half snaps. It's not enough for your guy who's getting the most yards per reception by miles of any wide receiver on this roster. And I bring all that up to just explain that when Brian Daboll opened up the year trying to take shots down the field, and you saw it in the preseason, you've seen it in years past as well with Brian Daboll, and it just does not work. We do not have a quarterback that has been accurate with the deep shots to be able to make things work, which is why I think that right now I think we've seen likely somewhere around the best of Daniel Jones. I don't think it's going to get much better than this. I know people had lofty expectations of 30-plus touchdowns through the air this year. I never thought that. I said if we could get past 20, that would be amazing for a guy like Daniel Jones this year. And he's on pace to do about that. He's on pace to have somewhere between 16 and 20 touchdowns right now. But they worked out a quarterback this past week, C.J. Beathard, who spent some time with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think he spent some time with the San Francisco 49ers as well. And only God knows, and Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, why they brought in C.J. Beathard for a workout. Because I have no idea why you would bring a quarterback of that caliber in to work out. You have those guys already on the roster, in Drew Lock, in Tommy DeVito, and you can include Daniel Jones in that mess as well. And going into this year, or next year, Daniel Jones is going to have a cap hit of $41.6 million in 2025. If you cut him, the dead cap hit penalty will be $22.2 million. So you could save about half that money if you end up cutting him. I've been hearing people saying maybe you can use Daniel Jones as a bridge quarterback. And I mean, just think about that. You're going to pay a guy $41.6 million to be the bridge to develop or help develop your next quarterback. That makes absolutely no sense. And then you got to talk about the injury clause, which is $23 million. If Daniel Jones can't pass his physical by the time we get to spring of 2025, the Giants will be on the hook for another $23 million, along with the dead cap if you end up cutting him at 22.2 million. So you're looking at $45.2 million to get rid of Daniel Jones off the team if indeed he is hurt by the time we get to spring and it's time for him to not pass his physical, we'll say. You're already paying Drew Lock $5 million to be on the roster, so you're looking at $50 million on the quarterback room right now. And I don't know how people didn't notice this in the beginning, and I don't know how Joe Schoen actually was on board for signing a contract with Daniel Jones of this type of magnitude. It truly makes no sense. Daniel Jones has been injured for 4 out of his 5 seasons. He's coming off a neck and an ACL injury in 2023. And I think that has big part to do with why his deep ball is completely shot in the first 4 weeks of this season. He looks like the same old, I guess, healthy quarterback that we've seen throughout the years, but there's something clearly wrong with the deep ball. And it's not that he threw a really good deep ball before this, but it has just took a drastic hit since then. And I think that the only thing that could save Daniel Jones' deep ball, and it's probably too late for this, would be anticipation. But Daniel Jones has never been an anticipatory type of quarterback like what you see out of guys like Tua in Miami or guys like Brock Purdy in San Francisco. So I really just don't see it happening. And I honestly think the time is running out on Daniel Jones. And if Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll don't find a way to correct this very fast, time will be running out on them as well. I see NYCE is really active in the chat, man. Big shout out to you. I appreciate you pulling up, rocking out with me today, fam. He says, we're going to get destroyed by the Seahawks. I think that there is a good chance we do get destroyed by the Seahawks. It would take, like I said, some of those injuries up front that they're dealing with. I mean, almost their whole front seven is dealing with injuries right now. And they got some dogs up there when they're healthy. I also like Jaron Reed out on the outside as well. But I think those injuries could maybe save us. But we did see in the last matchup between these two teams a season ago, which was the game that defined that Daniel Jones was not the franchise quarterback for a lot of people that were late to the party, was that game against the Seattle Seahawks where the famous Manning cast with Eli Manning and Peyton Manning on the broadcast, seeing Daniel Jones throw that red zone interception, pick 6 to, I believe it was Devin Witherspoon. He was sacked 10 times in that game. I remember, and if you guys get a chance, go back and check it out. There's a sights and sounds from the Seattle Seahawks game, that game. And they were just teeing off on Daniel Jones. And they were just like, you get a sack, you get a sack, you get a sack, and ended the day with 10 sacks on Daniel Jones. And sure, a lot of that had to do with how poor that offensive line was last year. But also, as I always tell you guys, a decisive quarterback is an offensive lineman's best friend. Look at what Jaden Daniels is doing in Washington with the guy in Bobby Johnson who was allegedly responsible for why our offensive line was so bad. And I do think Bobby Johnson had his fair share in it, but you also got to point the finger at the quarterback, because when you look at the total sacks last year, I believe it was 85 total by all 3 quarterbacks. Tyrod Taylor only had 17 of those sacks, and he took the most dropbacks of any quarterback on the roster last year for the New York Giants. Tommy DeVito had 38, I believe it was, and Daniel Jones had 30. So you're looking at 2 guys that really just don't see the pressure well, don't feel the pressure well, don't see the field well, and both struggle at times to stretch the field. I thought that Tommy DeVito last year was better than Daniel Jones was last year, but in total, I think they're basically the same type of quarterback. I think Daniel Jones is a better quarterback than Tommy DeVito, but that's not saying much. Now, going into this game, I think that if the Giants want to have a shot, you're going to have to obviously start with some explosive plays. And I think that thus far, Brian Daboll and the rest of the staff, I think that they're a little bit frightened to expose their quarterback. Because if you continue to take the deep shots down the field, I think, one, it's going to get the quarterback in more trouble. He's probably going to get more pressure. He's already 5th in the league. He's probably going to get more sacks. He's probably going to throw more interceptions. He's probably going to have more inaccurate passes. And in return, that's going to put Brian Daboll more on the hot seat for believing in this guy. But I think that that's the only chance they have right now, is to expose Daniel Jones and see if he can go out there and make this offense go vertical. With the lack of a running game right now, they have no choice, in my opinion. The Seattle Seahawks showed you on Monday night that you can throw the ball against them. We saw Jared Goff have a perfect game. Granted, they do have 2 really good young cornerbacks over there in Reek Woolen and Devin Witherspoon. Those guys are both really good, and they got Julian Love at the safety position, so their secondary is no slouch. I think they have a better secondary than we do. But at the end of the day, it's time to take the training wheels off. The season, even if you baby it like this and you have Daniel Jones throwing at a 6 yards per attempt type of clip, at the end of the season, okay, maybe his statistics would look better versus him stretching the field, but that's going to do nobody justice as far as job security goes. And I see Big Dog Status is in the building. What's going on, fam? He said that Malik will probably be out. This game is going to be atrocious. Yeah, I mean, you can't rush Malik Neighbors back. I'm crossing my fingers that somehow he can do what exactly Darius Slayton did the previous week, where he was in the concussion protocol, ended up coming back out there. and trying to be productive in the wide receiver core. I'm hoping that's the case because without Malik Neighbors, we're going to be in for a long day. Also, I think, you got to get some pressure on Geno Smith. You struggled to get pressure last week on Dak Prescott, who's one of the better quarterbacks against the blitz. And I think that's why, Shane Bowen approached the game the way that he did and didn't do what he did against the Cleveland Browns, which was send the kitchen sink at Deshaun Watson. He didn't do that against Dak Prescott because he knew in the end that was going to bite him in the butt. And in return, they had a couple of times there where our cornerbacks were out on an island, Deonte Banks in particular against CeeDee Lamb, and they got burned for a touchdown on that one with the absolute dime from Dak Prescott and a horrible angle from Tyler Nubin. I thought he could have made that tackle. It's interesting how eerily similar the touchdown to CeeDee Lamb last week was to the non-touchdown to Malik Neighbors on the left side. They're both on the same side of the field. One quarterback zips the ball in there. The other quarterback lobs the ball in there. One safety takes a good angle in there and makes the tackle on Malik Neighbors. Our safety takes a poor, terrible angle and misses the tackle on CeeDee Lamb, and CeeDee Lamb's in the end zone celebrating. It kind of just goes to show you that when you're banking on youth, these kind of things are going to happen. You're hoping that a guy like Tyler Nubin pans out, but to expect that to happen in 1 year, Joe Shane had said Andrew Phillips and Tyler Nubin were day one starters, and I don't think that he meant that in the kind of comparison of the day one starters we had last year with guys like Xavier McKinney. Xavier McKinney's having a hell of a season, an interception in every game through 4 weeks right now. And, you're looking at Brian Burns, you're looking at Kayvon Thibodeau, these guys really not having good years. Kayvon Thibodeau had a pretty good game against the Dallas Cowboys. He was responsible for half of our pressures. I think it was just 11 pressures on the day. And the Seahawks offense right now is averaging 25.5 points per game. The Giants are averaging 15 points per game. Seahawks are averaging 387 yards per game. That's 5th in the NFL. Their points per game is 9th. They average 3 touchdowns per game. That's 7th in the NFL. And 4.5 yards per carry. That's 11th in the NFL. Giants are going to have to find a way to establish a running game as well. 1.1 yards per carry last week is a disgrace to New York Giants football. Anybody that's been watching Giants football since at least the Eli Manning runs, during the Super Bowl runs, Amon Bradshaw, Brandon Jacobs, Derek Ward, you could take it all the way back to Rodney Hampton, Joe Morris. Giants running the football has been a thing since Giants football existed. And I cannot think of a game where the Giants left averaging 1.1 yards per carry. That's just a disgrace. And right now we're averaging 85.3 rushing yards per game. That's 30th in the NFL. We're averaging 3.4 yards per carry through 4 weeks. Is dead last in the NFL. And the Seahawks defense is right in the middle of the pack. They're allowing 21.3 points per game, but they're going up against the Giants who average 15 points per game. That doesn't sound like a nice matchup. They're allowing 283 yards per game, which is 8th in the NFL. The Giants right now, our passing attack is middle of the pack at 15th. And I just told you our rushing attack is pretty much dead last in the league. Rushing yards per game is 30th. They're allowing 2.3 touchdowns per game. The Giants just left the Dallas Cowboys game with 0 touchdowns. 1 explosive play. And they're allowing 116 rushing yards per game, which is 14th in the NFL. And 167.5 passing yards per game, which is 7th in the NFL. The numbers right now don't equate to the New York Giants getting a win against the Seattle Seahawks unless you see a complete metamorphosis from Daniel Jones at the quarterback position. And I saw somebody on Bleacher Report in the community saying, once Daniel Jones calibrates that deep ball, he can be a good quarterback. And I think that's going to be the biggest question is can he calibrate the deep ball and really be effective throwing the ball down the field? Thus far, that has not been the case. And if he can't do that against the Seattle Seahawks and we can't run the ball, I don't see any way that the Giants are going to come away with the victory in this one. I am going to let it kind of settle in, and I'm going to sit on it for, a day here before we do our preview stream on my YouTube channel tomorrow and see if I can find and weasel away into an angle where the New York Giants can win this game, where maybe some more data comes out about this matchup. And especially within the injury report, I do think the injury report is extremely important. Big shout out to Jesse Griffith one time in the building says, the Shane train has more misses than hits. And it does. It absolutely does. And, I was telling a homie, man, like he's always tweeting out like about the Joe Shane masterclass and, Joe Shane fleeced this person. And I just, I would be a happy person if we could just get rid of those words, masterclass and fleece, because every time we say that, time passes and it just doesn't fit the mold of what people are necessarily saying. I'm extremely worried about that Brian Burns contract right now. You're paying that guy $28 million and he's not even getting after the quarterback. Outside of the one strip sack on Deshaun Watson, who's a guy that has been known to hold the ball, especially during his tenure in Cleveland, Brian Burns has been a non-factor. And Kayvon Thibodeau, I'm willing to give him the pass because the whole plot here with bringing in Brian Burns was that you bring in a top edge rusher opposite of Kayvon Thibodeau to take the attention off of him and allow him to do what he needs to do to be able to take that leap and become that superstar player that could be the only superstar player outside of Malik Neighbors from any one of these drafts from Joe Schoen. So right now it's not looking good. There is a lot of football left, so I guess there is still some hope left. But I have been seeing a lot of people that have been, asking for Drew Lock at the quarterback position. My brother BT Giants in particular, who's been saying it might look different. It might, yield more turnovers. But at the end of the day, do we think that Drew Lock's going to go out there and be able to put over 15 points per game on the scoreboard? And I think it's possible. Drew Lock is a guy with a big arm. He's a guy that can stretch the field. But I think that when it comes to playing risky football, you're going to have to live with the issues that Drew Lock has when it comes to turning the ball over. He's basically been a 1-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio quarterback his entire career. He dealt with some injuries early on when he was with the Denver Broncos and whatnot. But when it came to explosive plays, I want to say in that first season as a starter for the Denver Broncos, Drew Lock had 20 plays that were explosive plays and a bunch of big-time throws. So, I mean, this similarly reminds me of the Jason Garrett, Joe Judge tenure, where there was a moment in time with Daniel Jones during that tenure where I was just like, I just want to see a different quarterback within the system and just see what it looks like to just reset and get me back. I wouldn't even mind if they started Drew Lock for a game or two just to see what it was. And then if the experiment goes wrong, then bring Daniel Jones back in. But you do got to think about the injury clause. You got to think about the future here. You got to think about next year. And I see Big Dog Status in the chat. He says there's no calibrating. There's no calibrating it. He's never really had it. And that's true. How do you calibrate something that never functioned quite properly? And a lot of people like to point to his rookie season and his sophomore season where he was efficient throwing the deep ball, but he had just qualified for the amount of attempts that were necessary for you to qualify for deep ball statistics and big-time throws. And I think that those numbers truly skewed a lot of people's perspective. I like to use my eyeball test and go along with numbers that support that, and then I look for things that support what I'm seeing at the same time. Like a lot of people want to use QBR this year. I saw somebody say that Daniel Jones is the 15th highest paid quarterback and his QBR is 13th right now. So that justifies the contract. And we all know, like anybody who really watches ball, like QBR is just one statistic that you can't hang your hat on. If you look at QBR in 2022, Jacoby Brissett was 7th in QBR in the NFL. He's not a top 7 quarterback in the league. And that's just one statistic. And I just feel like we're reaching for those type of things to find some kind of, angle that says that Daniel Jones is a good quarterback that has lacked the surroundings around him. And I do think that two things can be true. I think that a quarterback can be average, but also lack the things around him. And then when you put those things around him, he's still average. And I think that's where Daniel Jones is at right now. Shout out to D-Main 0618. I hope I said that right. That Main reminds me of Hustle and Flow, man. Shout out to Terrence Howard one time. But D-Man says, it starts this week. We lose Jones to the bench because season is done. Yeah, I do think that, this is we're running out of time, as I just said, right? Like if Daniel Jones goes out there and he puts up these similar type of numbers again and again and again, where it's just, a one touchdown type of guy a game, one touchdown a game type of guy, what's the point? The Giants are still going to end up in the same result, which is going to be a lot of losses. I entered the year before we got into free agency and I predicted that this was going to be a 4-win team. And when I saw some of the moves in the draft, obviously going out there and bringing in Malik Neighbors, I thought that would help the offense, and it has. But all in all, you're looking at a guy who really doesn't have many more passing yards than he had the 2 previous seasons. And when you look at the yards per attempt, it explains so much. In 2022, in Daniel Jones' best season, at this point, he had 631 passing yards. And now in 2024, he has 881, which, okay, it's great. You got more yards, but He's got 40 more attempts. The numbers are adding up. And I think that, yeah, he's just running out of time here. And Big Dog Status said they try to find anything to make dude look better than what he is. I try to make it clear that I'm not here to convince anybody off their opinion, right? But I am going to bring facts and things that support my opinion as well. And I think that it's overwhelming at this point. Anybody that still thinks that Daniel Jones is going to turn into an elite franchise quarterback, I feel for you, because for me, through my lens, there's just no out for that at all. And Big Dog Status 91 said the street's waiting on that body with the laughing emoji, because I said this on my YouTube channel, and Big Dog Status is somebody that be over there as well, that most of the people that want to see the New York Giants headed in the right direction, the streets need a real body right now. And that body's Daniel Jones. Once you replace the quarterback on this team, we can try to worry about everything else. But they have, through a 6-year tenure, tried to replace everything but the quarterback. I've been podcasting since Daniel Jones was drafted as a rookie in 2019, and I've seen literally every position change. And I'm kind of going through the positions in my head right now. I know left tackle, left guard, every position up front has changed. Center, right guard, right tackle, all of those positions have changed. They even tried to move our left tackle, Nate Solder, to right tackle, and that didn't work. We've seen the running back change. We've seen all the wide receivers outside of Darius Slayton change. They've got rid of everything. They brought in Kenny Galladay, Kadarius Toney, Sterling Shepard was out of here. You had, what was my dude in the first year? Oh, Golden Tate. And then there was Cody Latimer in the first year as well. All these guys are gone. Defensively, we've changed out everything except Dexter Lawrence. We've changed out everything. And now it's time to reset. We're seeing in Washington, within our own division. I live in Washington, D.C., so I get to see the coverage on Jaden Daniels and the rest of that offense. And everybody had these question marks about Cliff Kingsbury, right? Like, this guy runs a high school offense. This guy runs a college offense, is what they were saying coming into this year. And look at what they're doing over there. A perfect marriage with quarterback, head coach, general manager. I saw somebody in the chat talking about Adam Peters earlier. And I think that that's what organizations strive for, is a perfect marriage, starting with the owner, trickling down to the general manager, to the head coach, and his coaching staff down to the quarterback. And once you get those things, you could start to be on your way and start to rebuild. But I always thought Joe Schoen made a grand mistake in trying to rebuild and compete at the same time. And now that he couldn't really get his guys in the draft, the superstar players necessary to be able to build upon a roster, he's now trying to go out there and pay for those guys. And listen, any team that has cornerstone pieces that they feel can be a contributor to a team in a major way, they're not just going to allow him to just, be traded for a second and a fifth. And that always worried me about Brian Burns. And I saw, let me see who it was so I don't misquote. Somebody was talking about Dexter Lawrence earlier in the chat. It was Big Dog Status. He said, to be real, bro, I'm ready for them to trade Dexter Lawrence. And I swear I was one of the first people to come up with this concept before the contracts were signed. I said it here on Bleacher Report. We even had a little segment about it. And a lot of people gave a ton of pushback. And I do see people in the community still giving pushback on that, because a lot of people are rerunning with that same narrative that you should probably trade off some of your cornerstone pieces. But I just think it's far too late to do that now. I think you need to shore up the quarterback position, keep the pieces that you have around that are cornerstone pieces, see what happens with Brian Burns throughout the rest of the season. And if there's a situation where he continues to play this lackluster type of football that he has played throughout the first 4 games of the year, maybe you try to find a trade partner with him, or maybe you try to restructure the contract, or maybe have him take some kind of a hit on the contract and take less money, because he can't feel good about his play on the field right now. But I do think it's too late to try to trade off some of the cornerstone pieces unless the deal is just like monstrous. If you get the right deal, we have seen guys in the past. The comparison that I had made on the clip on Bleacher Report and the video that I have on my YouTube channel, if you want to check it out, was a comparison to Lermy Tunsil with the Miami Dolphins. And they flipped those picks, man. They got 2 first-rounders for Lermy Tunsil. They took one of those first-rounders, traded it to the San Francisco 49ers, and flipped it into 2 more. So in all, they had 4 first-rounders. Then they brought in Bradley Chubb. They brought in Jalen Waddle in the draft. They traded for Tyreek Hill, or signed Tyreek Hill, the edge rusher who's actually on IR for the rest of the season this year. I always forget his name, number 15. They brought him in as well. And then they drafted their quarterback that they thought was their franchise quarterback, and it did get them in the right direction. But now that Tua is hurt, you see that that system is very reliant upon Tua to be there. So, I mean, there are ways to make it work. Khalil Mack was traded for 2 first-rounders, a second and a fifth, I believe it was. So, I mean, if you get that kind of compensation, 2, 3 first-rounders, I mean, you'd be a fool to not consider it. And Big Dog said that he thinks 2 firsts is possible for Dexter. I absolutely think that. It's just what team would be willing to do it. I do think that as from a positional value standpoint, D tackle is not one of the higher positionals or positions that have high position value. And you're seeing it with Dexter Lawrence. I mean, this guy had a 0% pass rush win rate last week against a rookie center in Cooper Beebe. They were double teaming him and whatnot, but it just goes to show you that teams are going to be able to run the ball just like Washington did, right between the A gaps, right down the teeth of this defense, even when you have one of the best defensive tackles in the league. If that player was on the edge, or maybe even in a 4-3 type of defense, at least you could shut down one side. And you would have teams struggling to run between the A and the B gaps on at least one side of the defense. But being that Dexter plays nose tackle, I think it makes it easier for offensive lines to send double teams at him and scheme him up and make him a non-factor, not only getting after the quarterback, but also in the running game. So we'll see how it goes, man. It's looking real grim for the New York Giants. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I'm also a guy that prides myself on honesty. I'm not going to come up here and lie to y'all for clicks or lie to y'all so that, the stream numbers go crazy or whatever. Y'all know I like to just try to keep it 100 up here. So we'll see how it goes, man. This is a difficult matchup coming up against the Seattle Seahawks here on Sunday. I will be here on Bleacher Report after the game doing a recap. Shout out to Heck, your boy, who just popped in here, says, what's going on? I'm tired of seeing the Giants put DJ out there if he's holding us back. That's on our GM for putting us in that position. Absolutely. And a lot of people will point the finger at John Mara, the owner, that he kind of was, being a middleman in the conversations of the contract and whatnot. And there could be some validity to that. But nonetheless, I think that Joe Schoen is doing himself a disservice if John Mara made it clear that he had to do this with Daniel Jones after the playoff victory. And now we're starting to look, extremely foolish across the NFL right now, and it's becoming clearer and clearer by week that Daniel Jones goes out there and not playing poor football. By no means is he playing poor football, but everyone can see the limitations right now. I think it's very apparent, it's very obvious that Daniel Jones is a limited quarterback. And it reminds me of a few quarterbacks late in their career, like when you saw Andy Dalton's time running out with the Cincinnati Bengals. He's just a limited quarterback. I think that Carson Wentz dealt with some of that stuff as well in Washington and during his tenure with the Indianapolis Colts. Although he had 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, the Colts still looked at it like the quarterback is holding us back. And the Giants need to take a long, hard look in the mirror. And hopefully Daniel Jones is standing right next to them when they do that so they can see him in that mirror as well and understand that they have to move on at the quarterback position. And as great of a wide receiver that Malik Nabers is, it's puzzling that they didn't at least try to draft a quarterback in this draft. Heck, your boy says bring Bill Belichick. A lot of people have issues with that. I wouldn't mind it. And there haven't been many scenarios where you keep on an offensive coordinator because personally, I don't think that Brian Daboll is the big problem here. I just think that he's being held back by personnel starting at the quarterback position. And also the way that we have drafted at tight end and not assessed it. There were a ton of free agents out there at the tight end position that the Giants could have brought in, from Mike Gesicki to a bunch of other dudes that they opted to not go that route and spend 4th-round draft capital on Theo Johnson, who's a guy that I think lacks true athleticism at the tight end position and lacks route running ability. And isn't that great of a blocker. Him and Daniel Bellinger both getting called for penalties a lot when they're out there in protection. So we'll see. Heck, your boy said how far we have fallen to accept this play. And that's another thing. I'm glad you brought that up, Heck, because we've lowered the bar to the point now where it's on the floor for quarterback play. And I think that's a disservice to fans who truly just want to see this team headed in the right direction. And the frustrations have just boiled over. And you see it on social media, a lot of people being called fake fans. And why don't you go support another team if you're not going to just root for the team the way that they want us to root? But, I'm not a cheerleader for the New York Giants. I'm a fan of the team, but I'm not going to sit up here. You know how you can go to like a high school game and a team will be getting blown out like 45-0 on the scoreboard, and the cheerleaders for the team getting blown out are still cheering because that's their job to do that. It's not my job to cheer on the New York Giants. I'm just a fan, and I just try to assess the game to my best ability, and I feel like I am fairly knowledgeable on this team. I've followed this team for now 6 years, so I feel like I have a good gauge and a good grip on what's going on with the New York Giants. But we'll see. Maybe they can turn it around. It's not that it's impossible. It's just it's looking really dark right now for the Giants in New York. Last one we'll take before we get up out of here. Big Dog Status says, nah, man, we need one of these new innovative guys. I'm for Ben Johnson or Bobby Slowick. Now, Ben Johnson and Bobby Slowick both would be amazing. You've seen it with the offensive coordinator with the Detroit Lions now. 2 years in a row was being offered jobs for head coaching positions. And last minute was like, you know what? Pump the brakes. I'm going back to Detroit. I think he knows a good thing when he sees it. And it'd be nice to have, one of the innovative minds like that. And I do think that Brian Daboll is an innovative mind. I just think that when you can't throw the ball down the field, how creative and how innovative can you get? And when you are dialing up these plays that do open up the down the field shots, quarterback can't connect on it. NYCE11 says, can we grab a running back or do we just let Tracy loose? I think that's something we should address next year. I wanted to draft a running back this year. I was a big fan of a lot of the guys coming out. Marshawn Lloyd, Braylon Allen. I like the kid that the Cardinals picked up as well. He was my top running back in this class. Trey Benson from Florida State. He was my top running back. And he's not getting a lot of touches over there, but I do think that they have a really capable running back in James Conner, and that's not really helping them out. But I would have loved to address running back this year rather than address tight end in the draft and have addressed tight end in free agency. And now they're working out more tight ends. Lawrence Cager was cut with an injury designation as well. So I don't know where they're going to go from here. We'll see, though, man. But nonetheless, appreciate all of y'all rocking out with me today, man. This was a very chill vibe where I just wanted to assess a lot that had to do with the quarterback position, which I feel like we haven't done as of lately. And y'all know I'm one of those people that is very critical of the quarterback position. I'm always talking about the quarterback position, and I feel like we haven't really talked about it in the last 2 weeks because Daniel Jones has been playing some okay to good football. And in return, that's really took him out of the spotlight, I feel like. So I did want to talk about that today. But appreciate all y'all rocking out with me on this Wednesday afternoon. Again, I'll be here on Bleacher Report after the game on Sunday. So that'll probably be around 7:15, 7:20 for that stream. Tomorrow on my YouTube channel, we'll be doing a preview show for the entire NFC East. The Philadelphia Eagles are on a bye. So it'll just be Commanders, Giants, and Dallas Cowboys. And Sunday morning, we'll be doing a fantasy football show as well. So check me out throughout the week. If y'all want to pop in on the YouTube channel, it's Authentic in the Beard. If you're digging the vibes here, I'm sure all the people in the chat today are already following me here on Bleacher Report. I think I've seen all y'all followed up, and I appreciate y'all for supporting the content that I put out here. But y'all know how we end every stream over here on Bleacher Report and on the YouTube channel, man. Keep raising that bar. Keep living those dreams because the universe flows in Technicolor and surround sound. And a life without dreams is a life in black and white. Rest in peace to the podcast GOAT one time, Combat Jack. Rest in peace to Dikembe Mutombo and all the other fallen soldiers. That's all. We lost a lot of people this past week. So rest in peace to them, man, and prayers go out to their families to give them strength and the ability to carry on those legacies. I'll catch y'all on the next stream, man. This was definitely a vibe. I appreciate y'all again, man. Big salute to all of y'all. Y'all be good. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday afternoon, y'all. Peace.